What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we have another edition of the Overthinking MTG Podcast. Today I want to talk about a spell that is incredibly powerful, but it doesn't get the respect that I personally think it deserves. Additionally, this is going to be reprinted in the Lord of the Rings Commander precons. I don't know, it's an interesting one. So the card I want to talk about is Path to Exile. This is an instant for 1 white that says exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So it's an incredibly powerful effect on its face. You're exiling any creature, assuming that it doesn't have like protection, hexproof, or whatnot, but it's targeted removal, exiling a creature for only 1 mana. Now the downside is that you're ramping your opponent for 1. You're giving them a rampant growth. So that is a very significant downside. It is. You're boosting their mana production by a turn. The thing that I find fascinating, though, is specifically around the commander format. For some reason, this card is... It is present, it is there, but it's nowhere near as ubiquitous as another card that is very similar, that is considered almost a staple in the format, if not absolutely a staple in the format, and that is Swords to Plowshares. Now, Swords to Plowshares will also be reprinted in the Commander precons, which is nice. In Swords to Plowshares, it's very similar. It's an instant for 1 white, exile target creature, but in this case, its controller gains life equal to the creature's power. So the downside is less. Swords to Plowshares is a better card 90% of the time. It just is. I get that. But what I don't understand is what commander deck wants swords but doesn't want path. Like, I feel like they're both fantastic and they meet the need. In commander, you need targeted removal at a time when, you know, one of the things that happens a lot of the time, especially in commander, you know, casual commander, one person will get up to the 6, 7, 8 mana mark and be presenting lethal in one way or another. They have one very strong attack. They'll have a creature that is a combo piece that is doing something incredible for them, and you just need to remove it from the game. That's where Swords to Plowshares comes in handy. It prevents those game-ending scenarios from occurring, or those massive attacks, like perhaps like the commanders coming in for the commander damage that would knock a player out. Being able to exile that creature is critical in those situations. And additionally, in those situations, your opponent gaining some life back for their thing dying is negligible. You're just like, yeah, whatever. You can gain like 11 life, but I'm just not dead now, so great. Totally worth it, no question. And the question I would ask is, isn't giving them a land at that stage in the game equally as negligible? You know, they've already ramped. They have their mana base. They were able to establish the thing. Yeah, giving them 1 more land, it might mean that they're able to like recast their commander the following turn a little bit easier. That is a downside, 100%. Or it allows them to ramp up to, you know, a 9-drop that they're trying to like play, or some massive X spell. Like, don't get me wrong, I know that the land is a bigger drawback, but I still feel like the effect is more than worth it. Additionally, Path to Exile has a hidden mode that Swords to Plowshares, I mean, I guess it does, but it's nowhere near as good. You can target your own creatures with this. So Path to Exile is not only targeted removal, it could also be a ramp spell in the right deck. Like, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I definitely want to put this, like, I have token decks where I'll have like little 1/1 mites or little 1/1 soldiers running around that I don't really care about. Well, how many times would it be really nice to be able to turn one of them into a land? And this allows you to do just that at instant speed, even after blocks are declared. So you can even chump block with one of your little 1/1s and then boop, turn into a tapped basic. That's actually really good. Like, your Path to Exile can straight up ramp you. I think this card is excellent, frankly, and I'm really glad to see that it's getting a reprint in the upcoming Commander products. Now, it's seen a ton of reprints over the years because it is good. The reason that I'm continuing to harp on this, though, is because of its stats. So, according to EDH Rec, which scrubs like thousands of deck lists across the internet. Note, these are only deck lists that have been imported into some kind of deck tracking website. You know, so if it's not on the internet, it doesn't count. So who knows if this is accurate to like all commander players everywhere, or if the logic, you know, transfers. I don't know. But according to EDH Rec, Path to Exile appears in 37% of decks that they're able to pull from. Now, we're talking about a colored spell. 37% is an awful lot, right? It absolutely is. However, when you compare it to Swords to Plowshares, Swords appears in 60% of decks, making it just significantly more powerful. Now, I understand that there's a lot of interplay between, where one works, where the other doesn't, but honestly, I think Path is truly fantastic, and it deserves more love than it gets. I know I personally am going to get my hands on a couple of these in the not too distant future and work them into some of my decks, because it's targeted removal in the late game, it's ramp in the early game. It's brilliant. It's exactly what you want, I think, anyway. The other thing that I want to talk about while we're here is the reskin. One of the things that's great about this Lord of the Rings set and the Commander products as well, associated with it, is it gives Wizards an opportunity to take established Magic cards and reflavor them in a way that works within like kind of the Middle Earth lore, within the Tolkien universe. And Path to Exile is no exception. So what this depicts is on the art, if you're listening in the audio, what the art shows is a rider on like a bedraggled rider in the rain on this like tiny dirt path, riding away very slowly, it seems, from a well-lit town. Now, what that is, this is Grima Wormtongue, and behind him that is Edoras, the capital of Rohan. And this is after Gandalf frees Theoden of the corruption that Grima Wormtongue was leveling against him, through, that, because Wormtongue was acting as an agent of Sauron and corrupting Theoden. When Gandalf frees Theoden, there's this moment where it looks like Wormtongue is going to be struck down and killed, which frankly would have been fair given everything he had done. And instead, Theoden kicks him out and, exiles him just straight up. So Path to Exile. Here we go. We have the path leading away from the city. This is a character who was exiled in the story. And we're seeing them at a point where we don't normally see this character. So the art here did a phenomenal job. The art direction is great because it's showing this moment that we assume happened that we didn't see, of Wormtongue leaving, the town, presumably going to Orthanc to be with Saruman. And it's just awesome. Because in the book, he gets kicked out. We then follow Theoden, Aragorn, and the team, and we don't really see Wormtongue again until we see him much later, and he and Saruman are kicking it. Actually, I'm trying to think I'm trying to remember if we see him in Isengard, or if the next time we see him is during the Scouring of the Shire. I'm due for a reread on those books, clearly. But in any event, this is a cool moment of this character's life that we get to witness. And you have to admit, like, I almost feel bad for him in this shot, because he's on the road. It's just him and what appears to be a malnourished horse, just slowly leaving a well-lit, what appears to be a warm, comfortable, dry home. In this really dismal environment. Honestly, the art of that is top notch, and the flavor text is perfect. It's Theoden saying, "Go now, Wormtongue, whither you will, but then if we ever meet again, I shall not be merciful." It's perfect. It's absolutely just priceless. Yeah, I think this card's just fantastic. Big fan. Additionally, actually, the Swords to Plowshares reprint. Now, you'll notice Swords to Plowshares has been reprinted a number of times as well. There have been a ton of different variants. In the original, it shows like a farmer, and they're using a big scythe, and you could assume that, like, oh, that was a weapon at one point. It has been modified. And I don't know, I think it's a cool concept. The notion of Swords to Plowshares, I believe it's actually a biblical reference, where the idea of, there's a time of peace where warriors will actually pound down their swords and make them into plowshares. Like, we will not need weapons anymore. We will need tools to, harvest the land and live peacefully and happily. So that notion, and being able to exile a creature and gain life, is the notion of, like, this warrior is now retiring effectively, gameplay wise. I don't know. It's maybe that's a bit of a reach flavorfully, but I think it's cool. And so Swords to Plowshares, the Hobbit variant of it in the Lord of the Rings set, or the Lord of the Rings Commander products, it's showing what appears to be like a study or, you know, like a Hobbit's. Actually, I wonder if this is the, oh, you know what? This is there's actually a museum in the Shire. We don't see it during Lord of the Rings. And it looks like that's actually what it's referring to here. The flavor text says anything that hobbits had no immediate use for, but were unwilling to throw away, they called a motham. Their dwellings were apt to become rather crowded with mothams. And you can see a lot of, you know, farming tools like on the walls kind of being displayed. And then in one, it's showing two hobbits looking at a sword that is on a table being presented almost as a piece of art, you know. And so this idea of like, we have no more use for this blade, but here it is. So it's capturing kind of the premise, the idea of we are no longer at war, we are at peace. And even though it's not literally a sword that has become a plowshare, but we have a sword and we have plowshares in the same setting. Also, I love that. And Motham, actually, the museum that's in Lord of the Rings is referred to as a Motham house, which I think is kind of fun. Yeah, it's like fancy trash is the way that I think of it, which, I mean, they're things that we don't need, but we don't want to part with. I think we all have that, right? Anyway, but yeah, so this has been kind of Path to Exile and a discussion around commander removal and whether or not this card deserves to be in more decks. Granted, it's in 37% of decks. Like, that's still a lot. I just think it could be more. So thanks so much for checking out this video or the audio podcast. I appreciate it very, very much. Yeah, this is the Overthinking MTG Podcast, the unscripted, unedited show where we talk about individual cards for entirely too long. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will catch you on the next one.